In this video, I will be patching a hole in some old school drywall. First, I'll check where the studs are on this wall. I want to check this because I want to see if I can cut out a section of drywall close enough to the stud. The stud on here is pretty far away from the hole and I don't want to cut out that much drywall. So I'll put my own support in. I'm going to just look at where I want to make the cut for the drywall, just past the opening. And I'll use a level to get a straight line up and down. And then I'll go a little higher up and get a straight line with my level going across. And on the side here, there's a stud right just behind the drywall here. Now I'll take a sawzall and quickly cut into the drywall, just enough to cut the drywall away. And I don't have a perfect line there. Now you can see the stud here. The first stud located on the right will be very easy to work with because I can just cut a 2x4 and sandwich it right next to there with some screws. This second stud is pushed back about a foot past the hole. So I'm going to create my own support just on the outside right here. I always like to keep a clean space where I work. This helps me stay clear-headed while performing this work. Now I want to take some measurements for the supports I'll be putting in. I'm going to measure a couple inches above the hole, so about 12 inches total. I want to check with my hand to make sure nothing is in that hole to block the supports I'll be cutting. So I'm just going to be using 2x4s and I'll measure out 12 inches, get my mark, and use my square. Once I have my line drawn, I'll go ahead and cut this to size. And I'll make sure I do 2 of these, cut them both where I need. Now I have 2 supports that I can use. So this first one is going to go here on the left. And I'm just going to kind of work it in there. Should be plenty of space to get it back. I'll use the hammer just to gently tap. And to hold the stud in place, I'll use a screw through the actual drywall. And this is going to hold the stud in place. After I get my top screw, I'll put in my bottom screw. I had an issue when doing this where after I put my top screw in, the support actually moved. So what I did is I used a screw, put it in the wood, and then use that to pull back the wood where I need it to be. On this second part here, it's very straightforward. I'm just going to take my 2x4, tap it in place with the hammer, tight spot. And then I'll use a couple of deckmate screws. And I'll just screw that directly into the existing stud, basically sistering this up. This doesn't have to be extremely strong, but I like this to be very sturdy when I do any work. So now I'll take a measurement from my top to bottom of my drywall, and I'll go cut my first piece. On this drywall, this is the straight edge from the manufacturer on the left here, and that's where the parts normally meet for your mud joint. In the top here, this is also the straight edge from the manufacturer. I like to use these edges whenever cutting so I get a straight line. Since I'm not doing any joints here, I'm just going to go ahead and cut a line straight across. I'll use my tape measure to get my measurement that I took before, transfer that onto the drywall, and then use my level to make a straight line and score the first line on top with my razor knife. After the paper is cut on top, it's as easy as putting some pressure back on the drywall to flip it back onto itself and then lift slightly. And on this new line here, I'll use my razor knife to cut the back part of the paper. Now I'll take my second measurement, which these all should be square from before, but I like to double check. And again, I'll use the side from the manufacturer on the drywall to get a straight line. Same process on this part. And just cut that top with the razor knife, flip, cut the opposite side, and it's ready to go. The issue with this old school drywall is it's not 3/4, it's not 1/2 inch, it's not normally what you get from your hardware store. The drywall on these old school houses, this is in Florida, there was drywall, it was close to 3/4, and then a layer of plaster on top of that. So you're not really getting a straight line there. Because of that, it would look like two pieces of drywall at 1/2 inch would work, but they're just a little bit over, protruding past, and I really don't want that. So I'll use some standard composite shims here, and what I'll do is put the first piece of drywall in place, and I'll take my shims and eyeball them to get them so that they're flush or a little bit recessed from the drywall. And once I have that, I'll put them to the side and take out this little piece of drywall, use the screw there, and I have my shim set aside, and now I'll just go ahead and screw these shims into my supports. This is going to push the drywall out enough to where it's going to be recessed just a bit behind the current drywall. Now that I have that in place, I'll go ahead and screw the piece of drywall I cut out back onto the supports I installed. And I'm using grid tape for this. It's really a personal preference for this particular project. I like it because it's flexibility. So I'm gonna apply this on top, make a cut, and I'll come back on my opposite side of my razor knife and push this right into the corners and grooves here. I'll go ahead and do that all around. On this little part at the bottom, I used a little extra. The opening was a little wider than I wanted it to be. Same for the side on here. Again, this is a personal choice. This is just how I do it. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and mud this thing up. I'm gonna use some drywall plaster, it's pre-mixed. And I'm just going to coat the entire patch that I put on here. Now, the nice thing about this wall, it is a plastered wall, so there is a texture on the wall. So this finish job does not need to be a smooth finish. Actually, to match the wall, it needs to be a little rough. So I'm gonna get this pretty smooth, but keeping in mind that I want it to be a somewhat similar consistency as the existing wall. So that's where I ended up with my patch job, and I went a little bit out because the mud does shrink when the water evaporates. So the hole is gone, the drywall is patched, and it all looks pretty decent. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe.